Welcome back to Walking and Chewing. So glad to be with you on this Wednesday, and really excited to talk to you about a new sermon series that we're beginning, which is talking about the name of God. That is the most important name that God has given us of Himself. And I want to talk to you a little bit about names. Names are incredibly significant. I think as we, in modern American culture, they're much less significant than they even would have been in the ancient Near East. And yet they're still hugely significant. I mean, I would encourage you, the next time your friend has a baby, to tell them that you don't like the name. Actually, I actually wouldn't encourage you to do that, but it just shows you how important names are. I mean, there's really nothing worse than you could tell a parent, maybe other than you think that their newborn is ugly, then you don't like their name. Because that name represents something of the hopes and something of the desire that parent has for that child, and the hope that the parent wants that child to be. The name is hugely significant. In the ancient Near East, a name would have been even more significant. A name would have spoken of the character of that child. I mean, a lot of names we choose today, we choose because we like the sound of the name, or it's a family name, or it's a name that we it's something that sort of grabs us. But a name in Scripture would have actually represented the character of who that person was, and so it is with God. When God shares His names with us, God shares with us part of who He is. And so when we turn to Scripture and we see sort of the most important name that God has given us, we ought to prick our ears up, because God is telling us, perhaps sort of in the most direct way, who He is. And that's something, that's a name that can't be replaced by a narrative. It can't be replaced by sort of a direct explanation. It can only be encountered sort of as that name for us. And that name in Scripture is Yahweh. It's a name that God gives Himself and names Himself and calls Himself in engaging Moses. And we'll hear more about that story starting this Sunday. But it's a name that speaks to who God is and who God is for His people. It's a name which means I am who I am, or I will be who I will be. Now, why is it significant that God would have given him that name? Well, we're going to talk about that more in the coming weeks. But I just want you to ruminate on that for a little bit, that God would have given Himself a name that in a sense was so indirect, and yet in another sense was so direct about who He was. And so I want you to reflect on that today. What does it mean that God would have given us that name, I am who I am? What does that mean in terms of my relationship with Him? What does that mean in terms of how I understand Him in my life today? I pray that you would sort of reflect on that you chew on that, and I look forward to talking to you more about that next week. Have a great week.